I'm a lifelong raised in the Diocese of Wichita, Kansas, which is a wonderful diocese to be raised in. It's been a very Orthodox diocese. We've been blessed with good bishops all the way after Vatican II. We never lost the number of priests. We never lost our statues, our communion rails. And most parishes have a Catholic school that is tuition free. And so it's a wonderful small diocese with a lot of vocations. And so, but I was raised, I actually hardly ever saw a diocesan priest. I was raised in the little town of St. Paul, Kansas, which was a Passionist novitiate for the whole eastern United States. And so I was raised, we weren't a diocesan parish, we were part of the monastery. And so I was raised with Passionist priests and brothers. While I was growing up, there were over 100 priests and brothers in our small town and 2,000 people. And so it's like growing up in the Middle Ages. I thank God every day for my childhood of being raised with the Passionists. And they were missionaries, St. Paul of the Cross, who founded them, set it up so there's 6 months in the monastery, very ascetic, a Trappist style of life, fasting, prayer, and then they go out 6 months and they preach for 6 months, then come back in, recharge, refuel, and go back out. So they preached missions all over the place. And so they were also very good at speaking about the gospel, about the truth, about Jesus, about love to people who didn't know because they were missionaries. So I grew up in that environment. I was raised in a family, and I've never worn anything but black in my life. I was 4th generation in the funeral business. So I had to find something I could do with all black wood and a black car. But my family were Catholic, Irish Catholic, and they saw their vocation their work as vocation. It was 24 hours, 7 days a week in the business back then. In fact, even then, the funeral homes ran the ambulance service, so it was 24 hours a day, literally, 7 days a week. And they saw it as a vocation to our Catholic families. We buried literally generations. In fact, people would have someone in their family die, and they would tell my parents or grandparents or aunt and uncles, you just pick out the casket. You know us. You know what we like and what we don't like, how we live. And so it was literally a vocation with our people to serve them in ministry at a time of death. And so I grew up with that idea of life as a vocation for God. And then I went to college, the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, and sort of got away from that. I still went to Mass, but I can say I wasn't really pursuing holiness to the degree. I went through the University of Kansas during the Vietnam War, during all of that, when the university shut down, literally early in the semester, when they invaded Cambodia, it was shut down as a university, and to protest. And so after that period, I just went back home and went in the family business. And got my license as a funeral director, embalmer, and went back in the family business. And was there probably, my first cousin and I were the same age, and so our parents were nearing retirement and they wanted us to take over. By that time, 4 generations, the business had gone into everything involved with the funeral business. They'd gone into the concrete burial vaults, the marble, the granite, cemeteries, and we had funeral homes in 5 towns in southeast corner of Kansas. And so I was basically a spoiled rich kid. In fact, the city newspaper called me that one time, me and my first cousin, that we were just spoiled rich kids. And because we were fighting an established business in town to get rights to have another ready-mix plant. My first cousin and I, Chris. Anyway, so I went through that, but then as I got into that, it was like, this isn't all I am. This isn't what God's calling me to be, and it began coming back. In college, I'd taken a philosophy class. The University of Kansas, I don't know if any of you realize or have heard of Clear Creek Monastery in Oklahoma, and those are my classmates. The University of Kansas at that time had what was called a Western Civilization program, which was Catholic. It went 2 semesters. Anyone who wished to graduate from the University of Kansas had to take Western Civilization. These 2 semesters, which is Catholicism. So there were all of these, Kansas is a Methodist state, and all these young Methodist people becoming Catholic. And in the summer they'd take tours in Europe of all these places they studied about through Western Civilization. And so some of those fellows actually became Catholic, ended up in France at Fontgombault, monastery there with a dream of always returning to the United States. The Bishop of Tulsa, Bishop Slattery, visited there for a retreat, and they said, if you can get us land, I'll build you a monastery. So that's Clear Creek Monastery. And so there I began to get back into my faith, went home, practiced it, and then I just felt a call. That's where I was connecting. I took a philosophy class, actually a nun taught it there at the university, and we read Thomas Merton. And so I felt an incredible call to contemplative life. And so I actually became a postulant novice at the Gethsemane Abbey in south of Louisville, Kentucky. It's famous for Thomas Merton. And so I was there in the monastery for 3 years. And as far as I was concerned, it was heaven on earth. When brothers live in unity, there's nothing better. But after a few years, the Lord started telling me this wasn't the end. This wasn't where I was going to end up. And I've never been so mad at anyone in my life. Seriously, I was mad at God. I'm finally here after all these years, after all these changes, and now you're telling me, no, this isn't the end. I was planning on living there, dying there, being buried in that cemetery with Thomas Merton, who can beat it. So I left, but he didn't tell me for what. He just said, you're leaving. This isn't the end. So I left with a bus ticket home to Kansas, $500 cash from the abbot, a pair of Birkenstock sandals, blue jeans, a blue work shirt. I weighed 140 pounds. I had my head shaved. I looked like an escaped convict. When people saw me in the bus station or wherever, they pulled their children. So then I began this discernment and discerned the Lord was calling me, and of all places, Dallas, Texas, and to be a diocesan priest. And none of it fit. It has since, in many ways, it's fit. And I developed a real love coming from my childhood, from the Passionist Order, and from there at Our Lady of Gethsemane for our Blessed Mother. And she was very much a mother and comforting during all of this change and all this craziness that the Lord is putting me through. And so I was already a late vocation, not as late as Father maybe, but I just celebrated my 25th year of priesthood last year. And so I was a late vocation. Much of my priesthood has been devoted to youth. And I was at one of the huge growing parishes in North Dallas, 20,000 parishioners, a staff of over 100 paid staff, and more money than they could ever spend. And so we began a youth program which we could finance to the ultimate. And so I was called to youth ministry, and particularly high school at that time, through the Life Team program. One of my biggest angers at God in leaving the monastery was I would never again have the opportunity to be in that kind of contemplative union with God I had experienced in the monastery. When you've got hours a day to pray, hours a day. And I thought, I'm never going to have this again. I was very angry and very sad that I would never have that kind of a prayer life and experience with my God. So after a seminary, coming back home, getting involved with this, being thrust into this life team, which I'd never worked in teens in my life. Never had any desire to work in teens at all in my life. But it just was thrown into my lap. The pastor there, the founder of the parish, said he wanted the best teen program in the United States. And he didn't care what I spent, but he just wanted it. So he sent me out to Scottsdale, Arizona, Mesa, Arizona at that time, and one of the Life Team program began, which I did. But doing that, while I was there at this conference, and with some future parishioners where I was going to begin this program, they, at the ending night, had adoration, and then invited anyone up to be prayed over. And so I was sitting there. I had no real charismatic experience. I was other than the contemplative at the monastery. And so I was sitting there and I looked at these folks and I thought, if I don't go down front to be prayed over, nobody's going to. It's just reality, right? So I went down front and I can't remember who prayed over me actually, but the priest said, open your hands as an openness to God's Holy Spirit. I opened my hands. He said, I'm going to make the sign of the cross on each of your palms and then your forehead. His thumb touched my palm. I was out. I went down. This was a week after my ordination.
Aww.
So within a week, God had given me back that same experience of himself. So from there, it's been a crazy journey. And I have a lot in common. I've been sending people to Franciscan University of Steubenville for 25 years. I have kids there now who have their own kids, getting ready to go to Franciscan. And so it's been a wonderful journey. And Our Lady has always accompanied me as a spouse of the Holy Spirit, the one who enables us to do what we aren't equipped to do, but she loves us into it. God bless.
Yeah.